You learn a lot of humility, and no matter what you achieve and what you reach, to never take yourself so seriously, because it's true, you just don't know when you don't have it anymore.
Hi, George. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is our first episode of a new series here at the Hale Foundation, and we are so excited to highlight you today, Mr. Corton. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So you've held very impressive roles here at the Hale Foundation, also at Casita Maria, and then also at the FIU Foundation. How have these experiences influenced your life so far?
It completely shaped my life. As someone born to Cuban exiles, I came to this country. My parents came to this country by way of New Jersey. I was born in New Jersey. It felt very American, but also very Cuban. People ask me, where are you from? And I'm like, I'm Cuban American, even though I was born in the United States. It's interesting, and people that aren't Cuban American don't understand that. What does the Cuban come before the American, even though I was born here? So the journey started back in New Jersey, in Union City, and I ended up in Miami because of FIU. My parents had a Florida prepaid college, so the state system was where I was going to go. And I was like, I really, really want to start identifying again with my Cuban roots. So I ended up in Miami, went to FIU, and never dreamt that I would end up leading the foundation's fundraising efforts, 20 years after that. But it completely shaped my journey, because I thought I was going to go to law school, be a lawyer or a lobbyist. And there was a pretty hard pivot when I realized I didn't understand the real answer to why I was doing that, other than I was political science undergrad, and every poli-sci major was just going to law school. But I didn't have that answer myself. I didn't know why I wanted to do that. Just knew that everyone was doing it. And then it was like, I got an opportunity to enter the world of fundraising back in 2002, right after I graduated. And that's such a relative word, right? When you're an undergrad, you think of fundraising through the lens of your fraternity experience, your student government experience, and whatnot. Never realizing that it was a sophisticated profession, but it shaped my entire life, because I got the great privilege of meeting super successful families and individuals who also had big hearts, right? Because if I was talking to them, it was because they had a philanthropic bend. They wanted to do something with the assets that they had accrued. So I spent 20 years of my career in higher ed philanthropy at the University of Miami, and at FIU as my latest philanthropy, real profession. And it was the greatest joy. It shaped my approach to life. I never really understood anyone that just wanted to accrue massive amounts of wealth and didn't want to leave the world a better place, because I was overly exposed to the opposite. So I am who I am today as a result of that experience, obviously, and meeting Jacob and Caroline and helping them shape their foundation, and really the buckets that matter to them and the legacy that they're trying to leave has been a great joy.
It's incredible. And how has this experience, obviously you're working with a good amount of wealthy, like you said, wealthy families that are donating these amounts of money. How has this shaped you individually as a person?
It's completely shaped me. I think you then start to think about your own legacy, right? And what you want to leave. You also, part of it is helping families shape their legacy and what really matters. Because at the beginning, I think it's, and everyone does this, when you ask them, what do you really care about? And you start positioning things like the homeless, veterans, cancer. Well, most people will say, yes, of course I care about all that. But what really wakes you up? What makes you, that just really bothers me when you're walking on the street and you see someone that doesn't have shelter. That just pains me. I go to sleep at night. That weighs on me. Pediatric cancer, what's really making you tick? And that just completely shapes me and my outlook on life, and wanting to really understand the psyche of a person, and then the family, because those are different. A family is comprised of multiple people that have very different passion points. So then when you're shaping that foundation, that family foundation legacy, you got to bring all those things in. And then as part of that journey, you're also thinking about yourself and what motivates me, what things do I care about, what legacy do I want to leave, where's my charitable contributions? Because you are a facilitator, but you're still participating, right? As a human and as a professional.
It's amazing. And going back, you talked about the FIU Foundation. In 1 year, you raised $114 million in one single fiscal year. How do the lessons that you learned through fundraising and higher education in nonprofit sectors, how have those impacted you?
Well, let's go to that year, because it wasn't long before that the foundation was raising probably $20-30 million. So to go from $20-30 million to
It's incredible. It's an incredible jump.
it was an incredible jump. And it's also a foundation that didn't have a hospital attached to it. So when you look at those mega campaigns across this country, even University of Miami, where I was a part of, you're looking at those billion-dollar-plus campaigns. Most of them are rooted with a great hospital. And what happens in a hospital? Grateful patients. So I'm your doctor. I've saved your life. I've saved your child's life. You're an affluent individual. You ask me, Doc, what can I do to repay you? The doctors are pretty programmed by the foundation to respond and say, just donate to the foundation, donate to my research and whatnot. That's where those numbers really start ballooning. We didn't have that at FIU. So raising $114 million in a year, it taught me the lesson of relationships. And that was a result of many years really dedicating time to those relationships, because people give to people they know, they like, they trust. That last piece is the most important and the one that takes the longest, right? If I'm going to trust you with not only my money through philanthropy, but my family's legacy, that's going to take some time. So that year taught me the real value of relationships. And it wasn't the money, because $114 million, okay, it's a great number, but what did that $114 million do? How many lives are changed as a result of that philanthropy? How many students now can go to a university as a result of that philanthropy? How many now cancer-breaking research doctors are practicing something as a result of that philanthropy? It's the story of the philanthropy, not the story of the money, really.
I know across the board how large your impact has been, but even $114 million to me is just incredible. So let's move over to Casita Maria. It's the oldest Latino nonprofit in New York City. How do you view the role of cultural institutions in shaping the next generation of Latino leaders?
I think it's so important because in this country, cultural institutions are somewhat intimidating, right? If you're not raised with a family who really understands the arts, and you're going to museums, you're living in New York and you're going to the Met on a Saturday with your family. This group of young kids they're not brought up in those households. Most of them are latchkey kids that are living in where we serve in the Bronx, which is the poorest congressional district in the United States. And by contrast, being just a few miles from some of the richest zip codes in the United States and Manhattan, what do these kids get? They get exposure from a real early age into the arts and the world of the arts, and the ability for them to express themselves is so important. But it's not only that with Casita Maria. Also, it's their safe place. A lot of these kids are in single family homes. Mom or dad have to work overtime to just make ends meet. Where do they go after school? They go to Casita Maria. If not, they have a completely different life, if not for Casita Maria. But going back to cultural institutions and how they shape it, we're in a room right now with that piece being from the Wolfsonian on Miami Beach. It provokes thought. It's supposed to provoke thought, and it's unique to you and how you interact with that piece. And I'm not someone that's, overly obsessed with the arts, but I appreciate it. And I appreciate that, Jacob, our founder here, serves on the board of the Wolfsonian and spends a lot of his time and resources into giving the Wolfsonian the exposure it needs, because the Wolfsonian is a free museum. And that's access to the arts of a lot of kids that wouldn't have access to the arts. And they're sitting there on the third floor, they're away from their social media on their phone, and they're just having an interaction with a piece. I mean, whether it's the exhibit of plotting power and what happened back in history and how we're using propaganda to influence thought, right? To pieces on the cruise lines and what that did to travel. There's so many different things in just the museum of the Wolfsonian, which is just one of the many beautiful cultural institutions we have in just this city, let alone the United States.
I think that's really incredible, considering with the rise of social media, like you were saying, and technology, a lot of families aren't encouraging their children to immerse themselves. Very different than how it used to be in the past. I remember when I was little, my parents taking me to the Children's Museum and immersing myself in that. And I think that's truly amazing for these children from the disadvantaged communities to be able to be exposed to that.
Absolutely.
Extremely. So the Casa Cuba initiative, that was a historical undertaking at FIU. Can we go back to what inspired this project, and what role do you think cultural centers like it play in the broader narrative of immigrant communities in America?
It's been the greatest joy of my life to be part of something like that. It was there were three of us that started it at the beginning. Agustino Ariano, the president of FIU, Mark Rosenberg, and myself. And it was a response to a void that our community had. When anything was happening on the island, or anything was happening with the Cuban community here in Miami, we would rally at a restaurant at Versailles. That's where the news crews went. They continue to do that. And yet, we have been the most successful immigrant group in this country, in the history of the United States. And people don't remember that. And I mean, the Secretary of State of the United States is Cuban American. You know, CEOs of major corporations all over this country, of cultural institutions, including the Knight Foundation here, which is one of the largest foundations in the country, to politics, to universities. The newly appointed president of FIU, the largest Hispanic serving institution in the United States, is Cuban American. And we had no place to tell story, and to also influence other immigrant groups. We were in the Smithsonian Museum about 10 years ago when we were starting this idea. And we had the privilege of meeting with Lonnie Bunch, who was the founder of the African American Museum at the time. And now he's the head of all of Smithsonian. And he told us something really powerful. He said, "You're thinking too small with Casa Cuba. It needs to not just be a place for Cubans to tell their story and feel pride and connect to culture, but it needs to be a story that inspires immigrants who haven't even arrived on our shores." And that never left me, because I said, that is our duty, right? There were so many communities that opened their doors to the Cubans when we came here in the late 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s at the Mariel, that said, we got you. Because we had nothing. We weren't immigrants. We were exiles. So we came to this country. We had achieved a lot in Cuba. I mean, a lot of people don't know that Cuba was where color TV was founded, where a lot of breakthrough in medicine was founded. And it was the Vegas before Vegas. The affluent went to Havana to go play, and it all just crumbled. And I'll never forget, growing up, it was, sitting there with my grandparents and hearing the story of Cuba, and always with the lens of when we go back, when Cuba is free. Well, fast forward, it's 2025. It's the same Cuba. We are not free. This is our home. The United States is our home. And we owe it to the Cuban people who, I didn't have that struggle. I was born in the United States in the late 70s in New Jersey. So all I know is that those stories through my parents, and that's the rise of an immigrant community, because they gathered together and they supported one another. And it was also the Jewish community who opened the doors for the Cubans and said, we got you. We got work for you. We're going to do this together. And we did. And that power. And then you have a city now that's, our mayor is Cuban, Francis Suarez. It's just it was a story that needed to be told, and we had a home that needed to be built for it. So we are now in the final stages of construction docs, and it will be a 50,000 square foot facility on the campus at FIU, and it's a gift to the community. It will be open to the public for free, and we hope that it preserves our story, our culture, because the more generations that pass, the more separate we are from that, and we are feeling obviously much more American than we are Cuban. My nephews are an example of that. Even though they feel a connection to being Cuban, they're way more American. But how do we never allow them to forget that struggle, right? Because that struggle was very real. And also inspire immigrant groups who are here. Unfortunately, communism continues to spread across South America, through Venezuela and other places. And how do we try to bring them in and say, this is now your home? And, we passed through this, 60 years ago, 70 years ago. We got you. We're going to take care of you. So it was, that cultural institution will represent a lot. It will represent struggle. It will represent future opportunity. It will represent promise. And it hasn't even been built yet.
Wow. What an incredible way to not only honor your heritage, but also allow others to build that sense of connection to the past that they've had. And I just wanted to bring this up. Actually, my 8th grade teacher, she always said to us, you need to learn about the past to not repeat it. And not that you're not repeating the past, but that struggle that your ancestors faced immigrating here and building a new life here, just what an amazing way to honor them and recognize that that did happen.
Absolutely.
So,
and this is a country built by immigrants, and we never could forget it. Just because you immigrated 300 years ago versus 2 years ago doesn't change it.
Yeah, my family's from Italy.
Yeah, and the Italian story, very similar.
Yes.
And now, you've obviously assimilated to this country and you're American, but you don't ever lose that. And
No.
you're Italian and you do things differently. Your food is different. The way you just interact with family is different by way of being Italian. And same with me as being Cuban, what I like to eat, what I like to do, how we gather as a family, our traditions and all of that. But the more time goes by, the more that's lost and the more American it would become. But, I think it's really important to not forget where you come from.
I completely agree. And so I'd like to transition to your leadership also in real estate. You've worked across multiple sectors, from real estate to academia. How did you build and lead high-performing teams in such diverse environments?
It's all about people. Human capital is the most important asset you have. Even if you make widgets, the person making the widget and selling the widget is more important than the widget. So to me, it was always, how do I want to be led? That's how I would lead. I want to build authentic relationships. I always say, you're with your colleagues more than you are at home. So why do we have this barrier between work and home that it's like work has to be work? We're not robots. I mean, we're humans. We have emotion. We carry things that happen over the weekend. We carry things that happen during the day with us to work. So how do you lead with empathy? And I always led with empathy and always led with wanting to really know my people. My best friends are people that I worked with, all of them. I mean, everyone that I met, including Jacob, that I met while I was at the University of Miami working there. He was not working, he was a student. I mean,
Wow.
it was the story of being open to building authentic relationships at work that weren't transactional. And I always led that way. And I always wanted to make sure that my people knew that there was nothing that I would ask of them that I wouldn't do myself. We roll up the sleeves together. We win together. We also lose together. You don't always win. But how do you pick yourselves up, right? And how do you celebrate the small things? Because easy to celebrate the big victories, the $114 million year. But what led up to that $114 million year? All those small wins along the way. People always said that, George is give him any excuse to celebrate, he's going to celebrate. And it's true. That's why I do that in my personal life. But professionally, you have to. Because if not, you just wake up every day and are you inspired to come here? So I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud of the teams that I've led as a result of wanting to know who they are as a person. And, when they were struggling, understand what's going on, what's happening at home. Do you need time away? Take time away. And giving people that space, I think it's really important. And then they'll want to show up for you and want to win for you as the leader.
Yeah, your work does become your family, and that's so true. I feel like the environment here is a testament to that. Everybody's been extremely welcoming, and just I feel the sense of family coming here every day. So.
Absolutely. I'm glad you feel that way.
And so you've worked with giants in business and philanthropy, from Chad Moss to Marvin Shanken. What's one leadership trait you would say that you have adopted from the relationships that you've created?
Humility with Chad, someone that has been part of building the largest construction company in the state of Florida, the largest solar company in the country. That Moss family, when you meet them, you're just inspired because you've built such an empire, and yet you're so humble, right? And you care so much about community that I've always taken that with me. And with Marvin, it was always the presence of Marvin. He was this over the top figure that founded Wine Spectator and Cigar Aficionado, and he also never forgot where he came from. I mean, it was funny because it was 2008 that I met him when I was working at the U, and his phone rings, and it was the University of Miami fight song. And at this point, he's probably in his 60s, and I'm like, "Wow, you still have that?" And he's like, "Absolutely, the U is my place." And that just reminded me, like, never forget where you come from, right? And carry those passions with you. And then the last one that is, so many have inspired me along the way, but the one that, if I had my blue suit coat on, I would have it in here inscribed, is Joe Echeverria, the CEO of the University of Miami, that I met when he was the CEO of Deloitte and I was at UM. And we brought him in to be an executive in residence for a day. I only asked him for one day. I was like, "Dude, give me one day." And he did. I was like, I want the students at UM to know your story and to be inspired by your story. His story is a latchkey kid from the Bronx that made it to the highest ranking position in public accounting. And in the middle of the day, I said, hey, do you need a room to go do emails or check your phone? He looked at me like I was nuts. He was like, why would I need that? And I was like, because you've been with us all day. He said, George, I had yesterday to be in yesterday, I have tomorrow to be in tomorrow. Today I'm with you. And I gave you my day and these students my day and the faculty my day. So remember to always be in the moment, be present. So as a result, the suits that I can get inscribed in here, I say be in the moment. Because especially now with social media and all of that, we could be so many places, and yet when are we living the present, right? And we owe it to relationships to be present. And those are just some things that I picked up that have really shaped who I am.
Wow. I even find myself sometimes in the middle of a conversation glancing at my phone or thinking about what I'm doing next. And I think that is so important to just be in the moment.
Absolutely. Be in the moment. And I always also say, spend time with people. Not your phone, spend time with people. When I graduated college, there was a book that came out called Never Eat Alone. Keith Ferrazzi, who was the chief marketing officer at Deloitte, wrote it. It's still the way I work. It's still the way I handle myself. And it's not just about never eating alone and sharing meals with other people, but it's about being real to other people and doing favors and things for other people, not because you want anything in return, because that's who you are as a person. And those things will be paid back, and they have. So those are all things that shape who I am, as a leader, as a person. And I'm only 45, so I have more along the way that hopefully will inspire me.
Wow. Yeah, I always say everything happens for a reason, and I believe in karma. I think the energy that you give to the world around you will be reciprocated. And like you're saying, you giving out favors to people and giving people your time, it's going to be reciprocated in the future. And that's a testament to how successful you've been.
Absolutely. When I left FIU, I was so FIU that people would call me still and be like, can you help me, my son or daughter, get in or something like that. And people would ask me we don't work there anymore. I'm like, so? If I could help someone's life, just make it a little bit easier to navigate a super complicated, large bureaucratic institution, why wouldn't I do that? I don't understand, why wouldn't I do that? Why wouldn't I help someone, figure out how to apply to college, how to access scholarships, how to get into the University of Miami, because those worlds are complicated, especially if you come from a first-gen family. You're not sitting around the table talking about that because your parents don't have the experience.
No. And especially with how difficult the college admissions process has become, that's truly amazing, truly amazing.
Yeah.
So my next question for you is, we spoke a little bit about this previously, but how has being the son of Cuban immigrants influenced your approach to leadership, both in your business and also in your community work? You
can't take anything for granted when you're born to Cuban exiles, because remember, they don't really see themselves as immigrants at the beginning of the story. They do now, because this is now their home. But at the beginning, they were exiles. They were here on borrowed time. They were just temporary. This was our temporary home. And you never forgot hearing, I heard that all the time. When Cuba is free, when we go back, we're going to claim our land and this and this. And, what was I? I didn't know. And you are always told the story of what they had and what was taken from them. And I'll never forget my mom, who still to this day will tear up, because she remembers the day that the Castro government came to their farm and said, okay, this is ours now, and no longer yours. And her father, my grandfather, breaking down. And it was the first time she really saw her really strong, alpha father break down. And that was it. You couldn't do anything about it, and everything was done. And you had to work for the government. So my mom they didn't leave till 70. So they were under that regime for 10 years. So she remembers that. And being born into that, you don't ever unhear it. And you see that those raw emotions that are still very present, even though fast forward, how many years, and those are still there. And it shapes who you are. You don't take things for granted. You work really hard to make it, because you saw that nothing was any work was work that they were willing to do, because even though they had cushy lives in Cuba, they didn't have that anymore here. So factory job open up, take it, whatever it was. So you learn a lot of humility, and no matter what you achieve and what you reach, to never take yourself so seriously, Because it's true, you just don't know when you don't have it anymore. So that's why I appreciate people that have amassed a lot of wealth and want to give it away and inspire others and pave the way for others.
Obviously, you have helped countless people with their own wealth accumulated create their own legacy. What legacy do you hope to leave behind personally?
My people. I think my legacy will be left for my people. I couldn't be prouder. You know, we accomplished a huge goal at FIU of raising, the goal was to raise $750 million, and I'll never forget it. It was 2009 when Mark Rosenberg became president. I was at the University of Miami working for an amazing dean in Barbara Kahn, who had aspirations to build. She came from Wharton. She wanted to build the Wharton of the South at the business school, and we went to his inaugural, and he announced his campaign. Mark and I are close, and he calls me into his office, and he's like, when are you going to come back home? And I wasn't ready yet. You know, I still had a lot to accomplish with Barbara at the U. And I said, Mark, you know, how did you come up with the number? And I was like, is there a feasibility study? You know, whatnot. It's like, no, there's a feasibility study. It was, $1 billion seemed too big and $500 million seemed too small. So he's like, we landed on 750. I was like, okay. So knowing that and then going to work and lead that campaign was really powerful. And seeing what my people, after I left 3 years ago, actually this month, 3 years ago was when I left to come to Jacob. And now they're leading the most important institutions in our community. Goodwill is led by one of my team members. Camilla's House, Gulliver, Barry. I mean, so many institutions here locally are people that, you know, I had the privilege of working with, and now we're shaping our communities.
It's incredible, incredible. And I'm sure you've already created a legacy for yourself, but I can't wait to see what the future has for you. Looking back on your journey from an FIU undergraduate to a leader, because you spoke about how you were engaged in a lot at the University of Miami, but you went to the FIU. Mm-hmm. What personal or professional moment stood out as a turning point in your career?
It was when I sat with Chad Moss, and we were at a bar at Garcia's. I'll never forget it. And he was 44 at the time. And he obviously, Moss Construction was being built. It wasn't the Moss Construction is today. But I turned to him and I said, you know what I don't get? I don't get why people wait to leave their legacy versus living their legacy. I mean, what a joy it would be if you were able to do this, something really big right now, and enjoy it for the next 40, 50 years, versus when you're 80 and you're thinking, oh God, what is my legacy? And we started talking about that. It's something we both adopted, and that resulted in him naming the Moss School of Construction at FIU, which still stands to date as the largest gift given by an alum of the institution. And it wasn't the dollar amount, it was the legacy it created for him, for the family, for the company, and what it did for the school, and what it did for the alumni base. It gave the permission for our alumni, because we're a really young institution, to say, oh wow, FIU is a place that could hold my philanthropy, could shape my legacy. That was the beginning point that led to other mega gifts from alums like Carlos Duarte and Tina, John McKibben. You know, so many other alums followed, and it wasn't they were following him. They were just like the conversations started around alums giving at that level. That was the singular most important moment of my career. We still always, he has it in his desk, the picture of him signing the gift agreement. We were at Runway 84. He was in a baseball cap and a white t-shirt. And I was like, you know, this is historic, right? This is a big moment for you, but not only for you, but for our community. And it still is. So I will say that is it. And now full circle moment, you know, I work with Chad and the family on their foundation and deploying that. So it's been the greatest joy of my life.
Wow. And not only will that legacy stand throughout his time here, but way beyond that. And
absolutely.
What an incredibly amazing gift to give.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was so incredible to be able to listen to your story and the legacy that you're creating here in Miami. And we look forward to speaking with you again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.